Hello guys, Wei Chong here from ENSŌ Powerlifting, and today we're going back to training chats. So today is the 4th of August, and the last training chat we were talking about my training block. So these were the couple of things that we talked about, and I just want to give a little bit of update on them as well as what I'd like to reflect upon going forward. So, as a recap, I was talking about myo-reps with the main lifts and accessories. I'll just cover this portion first, but for the rest, I will split them up into SPD and I will talk about them in totality later. So, for myo-reps, I think going forward, we were approaching this sort of conundrum with the myo-reps with just accessories, and I was experimenting with them on the main lifts as well. And I was thinking, yes, it would come to approximate the cluster sets in a sense, but I think it didn't really work out too much for me. Even this block, I was doing just incline barbell bench press and close grip bench press with my reps. There just doesn't seem to be enough of like a threshold, and what I just experienced instead was a lot of fatigue without a lot of gains in a sense. I did appreciate the fact that I was able to get more repetitions, but I think in this case, I think at the end of the day, there are a couple of ways to approach this. If I keep the intensity low, I can continue to use the myo reps as a schema, but in order to increase the intensity, I do have to start to break them up into more sets. Because if you think about it, let's say if you rest 30 seconds between cluster sets, or if you rest like 20 seconds after the main set followed by 5 repetitions of myo reps, right? At some point, right, if you start to increase the rest time, you can get higher quality repetitions and sets that come after. So you start to approximate what you're usually doing in powerlifting training anyways, with multiple sets of moderate volume, multiple sets of moderate to high intensity. And I mean, the longer the rest time, the greater your quality of your subsequent sets. So it's like rediscovering the wheel again, but then the wheel was always there to begin with. So I'll likely just move on to what I'm usually doing and just do moderate intensity with a moderate rest time in between. Like I mentioned, reinventing the wheel. So for accessories, I'll continue to maintain the myo reps. Really like them. And I've basically been doing them for all single joint isolation exercises like bicep curls, lateral raises, tricep extensions, leg extensions, hamstring curls. I don't particularly like to do them on the more compound lifts like pull-ups or let's pull down or like leg press, things like that. It's just really difficult to recover from. So again, I think we're gonna approximate something closer to um, generic training, and that's just sometimes just have to go through the process to be like, oh yeah, this is exactly how it works, and there's a logic for why we do things the way we do them. And yeah, I'm basically just reinventing the wheel and rediscovering rest time between sets again. Yep. Just to recap again for the bench press and the deadlift before I move on to my new reflections and my directions going to the new block. For bench press, I was talking about my recurrent shoulder pain, and I was decreasing my grip width to accommodate for that. And the last block, we talked about how there's this dynamic centration of the joint, in basically saying that if the joint is kept within the center as it's rotating or as moving, then there's less likely to be like irritation of the joint capsule and less irritation during the lift itself. So with heavier loads, it might start to happen. It's going to be more prominent with joints that have like a lot more mobility within the joint itself. So think the shoulder joint, think the hip joint. It's going to be less likely to happen with joints that only have one or like two planes of movements, basically, like the knee joint or the elbow joint. So talking about how specific warm-ups have been introduced to help me work on that. And then the last thing that I want to recap is the deadlift. So I've been rediscovering the sumo deadlift with a very specific intent in mind. It's actually quite an interesting technical breakdown where I was experiencing a lot of right knee pain associated with ankle instability. So whenever I try to produce force through the sumo deadlift with an externally rotated foot, then that causes a lot of like torsion, a lot of twisting force through my right knee as the ankle collapse. So the hypothesis going forward from then was that if we address the ankle instability and we are able to maintain the foot arch, then we would experience like a better improvement in the quality of life through standing, walking, climbing stairs, things like that. And then to translate that into a stiffer ankle that can tolerate the sumo deadlift. So I just want to run through my experiences so far and summarize what I want to go through going the next block. So for squats, something that I didn't discuss beforehand was that I was putting it on the back burner, and very interestingly, I was just doing just one set of comp squats per week. So my setup was one set of comp squat, uh, pretty heavy weights. I was doing 170 kilos for first 2 weeks, 177 for the week 3 and 4, and a set of RP8, just one set, and then followed by leg extensions. Day 3 was just 2 sets of Smith squats and leg press. The idea here was just to put the squat on the back burner, make sure that I'm not accumulating too much joint fatigue that might interfere with what I was testing with the sumo deadlift. And I think with whatever I was going, like I was experimenting with the bench press and the deadlift, I just wanted to get away from the squat and really let the hypothesis with the deadlift shine through. It did bring me to think about how I can consider the transference between the low bar squat and the high bar squat. So one of the things that I did mention, one of the things that I experience with my athletes and myself is that when I go through blocks of high bar squat and I move to low bar squat, there's a lag. There's a sort of like lag in the transfer from the high bar to the low bar. I think this happens because there's psychologically, how do I say this? In my mind, when I was transferring my gains from the high bar squat to the low bar squat, I was thinking that they have to be technically very different. That the high bar squat should be this position on the traps, and the low bar squat should be as low as possible. But because the bar is now low as possible, we are now challenging the squat in positions that's not really uh, sustainable in a sense. So have you ever seen like French powerlifters who put the bar super low on their back and it's like riding on almost the middle of the scapula, and they are like so twisted over and bent over trying to hit depth? So imagine that that is happening to you at a smaller scale. So what happens is you have to bend over a lot in the hips. You have to maintain like super rigid spine with just the right amount of thoracic extension, thoracic lumbar extension in the spine. So when you start to put the bar really low, a couple of things can happen. One is your grip width and shoulder mobility can no longer take it. So it starts to eat into your thoracic mobility, and you start to see a lot of thoracic extension, and that might transfer down into excessive lumbar extension as well. So because the spine is now overly extended at these 2 portions, you're gonna get a little bit of what is conventionally known as the butt wink, where the hip will like dip in and out at the bottom. One is it kills the rigid spine position, so you are losing a little bit of brace. Actually, not a little bit, quite a lot of brace and tension through the spine when your spine is like in an overly extended position. Yes, a little bit of overextension in a squat is good if it's helping to contribute to the force production. But if you are having to then sacrifice that positioning to get into a deeper squat, that's where things start to fall apart. So that's one thing you might notice if you start to put the bar a little bit too low for yourself. Second thing is with the lower bar position, now the wrists, the biceps, the elbows, the shoulders start to take on a lot of load. And you'll notice like perhaps some symptoms of tendinopathy, especially in the forearms and the biceps. So that can happen, and it has happened with my athletes as well. But the fix is quite straightforward. Oh yes, the third thing that will also happen is you will start to feel like you are already hitting depth, because the feedback from your hips tells you that you can no longer go any deeper. It feels like I'm really sunk down to ass to grass because of how much hip flexion is required in the bottom of the squat. So all of these three things are now just throwing off your squat positioning and rigidity and technique. You think you're squatting as deep as you can. You feel like you can't go any lower, but you are like almost squatting too high. You're maybe just hitting that, and your back just doesn't feel great. Your shoulders just don't feel great. I would like almost say that this is the same as like widening your grip so far on the bench press that it starts to become more of like a joint exercise where you're challenging the integrities of the joint in order to sustain the position, rather than really like loading the muscles and having the muscles be the prime mover. Basically, it's like playing the ROM game, and that has always been a thing that I've been uh, advocating against. So it comes as a timely reminder to myself when I start to experience those things for myself and with my athletes when I transfer between low bar and high bar squat. There's just one thing that if you're going through the same situation, the same transfer, that this may be happening to you. One thing that you can do and has worked well for me is we just acknowledge that actually a low bar squat, high bar squat shouldn't be so different in technique and positioning. You don't have to like shove the bar down so low on your spine. It's okay to just maintain a little bit um, higher bar position in the low bar squat, and that'll be okay for you. Once you do that, you might find that it's all all the issues that I mentioned earlier will go away on its own. Okay, easier on the shoulders, the elbows, easier to hit depth. You can actually feel the rebound from the bottom now. You don't feel like you're bent over so far, and less like all those weird spine movement, and better um, rigidity through the torso itself. Try that out. Let me know how it works for you guys. Another thing that I was like experimenting with was the again the discrepancy between like the high low repetition versus the high repetition low load transfer. So because I was messing around with so many like myo-reps schema in my previous training blocks, I do have to keep the intensity relatively low. In a sense, you can't do a triple and then like rest 20 seconds and expect to hit another like double or triple in your myo-reps. So a lot of the myo-rep sets I was doing is like into the 15-20 range, repetition ranges. So in order to accommodate for that, the load has to be like decreased substantially. And while that has like helped very well for my joint health in general, that is not how powerlifting training is best served. Um, Powerlifting in general, okay, I won't say in general. The demand of powerlifting as a sport is your ability to produce force in one repetition, and that's basically it. How heavy you can go on one repetition of squat, bench, deadlift. So you imagine you do like 20 rep squats, 15 rep bench press. How do you then transfer that skill across the whole spectrum to succeed in one repetition? I think it is possible, and there are some programs out there that um, are working on that. I think for me right now, as I'm experimenting, it's still a question that I'm considering for myself as well. When I look at my own training as an athlete, so I'm thinking, okay, I can do 10 repetitions of 160 squat. How do I translate that into a higher 1 rep max without like drastically changing the training? Because if you think about it, to move from one end of the spectrum to the other end, right, it's not just one or two blocks in order to achieve that. Uh, there is a lag time, so that by the time you achieve, let's say, you move from 10 repetitions to 7 repetitions, you increase the weight accordingly, right? Then, uh, I mean, you might be able to hit a new 7 rep max, but then you move on to 4, you hit a new 4 rep max. But then, like, your adaptations from the 10 rep max starts to just fade. And by the time you get close to the 1 rep max, right, whatever adaptations that you have achieved in the 10 rep max completely fade. So who's to say that by the time you adapt your training all the way to 1 rep max, that you are actually able to maintain any of the gains? And in this case, is it really worthwhile to get so far away from the 1 rep max for whatever reasons? So this is purely for the skill and physiological strength adaptation standpoint. It has nothing to do with like the psychology of the athlete, the joint health, how beat up that one person might be from particular kind of training. And then that comes down to like, block periodization, and how I remember John Kiley was like talking about how block periodization shouldn't really exist on that kind of spectrum when you're trying to translate um one attribute across blocks, um and have that be sustainable. So in powerlifting training, this is just a question that I'm thinking about over in my own head. Um, I'll come back to you guys with an answer for this, or rather my answer. But I think moving forward, I would um, keep the training to moderate volume, high bar squat, keeping within the mid range basically, and just sustaining it around that range. And keeping in mind that high bar squat and low bar squat technical differences shouldn't be that high. So when I transfer back from the high bar squat to low bar squat, either in terms of technical positioning or the load repetition schema, that it's not such a rude shock to my system itself. So going forward, that's my focus for squats. For bench press, I was doing a 3 times weekly pec focus, so really trying to redevelop the pec over years of like shoulder pain induced pec neglect, and it's been going well. I've been noticing some really juicy gains. Um, One more thing I did notice is with all the um, shoulder warm ups that I was talking about specifically, it helped to reduce the joint pain, and I'm actually able to return back to super wide comp grip for myself. That being said, I'm not sure again if I want to play that ROM game once more, but it's good to know that I can do it if I want to. The next question that does come to me is like, how specific does the warm up have to get at this point? Because I was talking about, activation maneuvers, warming up the shoulder joint, getting the external rotators and upper back ready for keeping the joint in position during the bench press itself. And I was like messing around with quite a few exercises. Sorry. At some point, you have to like consider how much time and how much energy do you have to just complete like 4 or 5 different exercises just to get the shoulders warm up. And then at some point, is it question of I'm just too weak in those particular positions and muscles, and then we should just dedicate a block to strengthening those particular muscles. And this is a concept I've talked about in one of my warm-up videos as well, talking about how sometimes if you need a very long time to warm up, that it may be the case that the particular positions are just too weak for you, and you'll be better served by strengthening those particular positions. So I was thinking about how to translate that in my particular case. One thing is general conditioning. I like to hammer the upper back and all the muscles around the scapula to make sure that I'm hitting all the spots that I need to. It's a lot about like just carpet bombing. But in the case with the priority of making the muscles so strong that I no longer have to warm up so much. So that's the goal that I'm aiming for. I'm gonna carpet bomb my upper back and see if, let's say, in 2 blocks time that I no longer need to do like a 15-minute warm up. I can do a 5-minute warm up and I'll feel just as good. So that's the idea I'm going with. I think the next point that would be important to talk about, or rather for me to consider, is how do I then try to work on the scapula's ability to stabilize under dynamic load and positions. So to simplify this, it's how do I get my shoulders to stop freaking out when the bar is like coming down towards my chest with 140 kilos or 120 kilos loaded on the bar. It means that the muscles around the scapula must be strong enough to accommodate that. That's one thing. It must be able to tolerate the changes in position. So from lockout, 25% down, 50% down, 75% down, pause position. So all of those things, you can't just keep warming up all specific small muscles or just generally condition or strengthen the muscles. There must be a way to train that in the bench press without doing some weird like physio movement where you're just doing like maybe 2 kilos. So that's the next question that I want to work on. I think I will start off with, again, those kind of weird physio movements where we are training the shoulder blades through a variety of movements first. So I was talking about this with my ex-coach, and he was suggesting like Hindu push-ups. I do not like push-ups, but we'll go with that for now. Personally, I would like to try the bamboo bar bench, but it's very difficult to do that in Singapore. There's just not equipment or like knowledge about this movement in order for me to just try it out. So I'll let you guys know if I find an answer for this. But this is the general direction that I'm going in. For deadlift, happy to report that the experiment worked. So part of the hypothesis was proven. So just run through what I was aiming for. So the hypothesis is my right foot has perhaps like some ankle instability from sprain from long time ago that I do not remember. So the arch of the foot tends to collapse in certain positions and over prolonged exertion. So prolonged exertion, you can think of it as walking 15k, 20k steps, wearing like bad shoes and standing for very long periods of time, or just that kind of like prolonged exertions in daily living, right? Very very common for everybody. Let's say you go to Japan, you're gonna have like those kind of situations where you walk like 25k. So in the past, for me, how it manifests is just knee pain. I feel it's very 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 acutely in my knee, and my ankle has never acted up before, so it never led me to like think, oh, it is a ankle issue, because it's always a knee pain. Annoyingly, this issue has been around for me since before I was a physio, so I think like a lot of me just carried the assumption that, oh, the knee pain has been there, so it's always been the knee pain. And then I got my physio degree, and then like that assumption stayed with me. It's only recently that I revisited the assumption, and I really paid very close attention to what's going on with my ankle, and I tried it out. So I tried a lot of like short foot exercises, strengthening of the posterior tibialis, all different kinds of exercises to stabilize the knee and the ankle, and just make sure that in day-to-day life that I'm not causing too much stress to the ankle and the foot arch, and just observing how it manifests. One day I clocked 18k steps. The most interesting happened. The most interesting thing happened is the knee pain wasn't there. My ankle started to hurt a lot, and the area where the muscles connect for the short foot exercises and the posterior tibialis, the ones that I told you I was strengthening, they were super sore, really super sore. And that's when I knew, okay, my hypothesis has some light at the end of the tunnel. Because what I was looking out for was, sometimes the weakest link in the chain will break when it comes to the muscles, joints, kinetic components of your body when you're trying to execute like certain movements. For me, prolonged walking led to knee pain. But then to me, it's just like, oh, okay, if knee pain, then we strengthen the muscles around the knee. But then that was incomplete, like, hypothesis. So along the way, we just slot a couple of more components inside. And I was just thinking, okay, overexertion causes the foot arch to fatigue, and you can no longer maintain the foot arch, and it goes up the kinetic chain, and it gets hit in the knee first. So the knee starts to experience the symptoms with all the twisting force and all the collapse of the knee position first. So that happens first, way before any of the ankle or foot soreness will come in first. And what if we address the ankle and the foot? Then perhaps we can link up the whole chain, and now make sure that the ankle, the foot, can sustain all the demands, and therefore the knee will no longer hurt. And it worked. I'm extremely happy about this, and it just goes to show that for myself, I've been training for so long. I've been a physio for 3 years, and there's still many many things to learn, and I'm just so happy that I got some direction in my training. Bonus points is like my knee no longer feels like it's gonna give way every time like I walk more than like 15k steps. So if you're in a similar situation, then perhaps consider this for yourself, or you can like just hit me up for a consultation if you are like having some similar issue. Then we can go through it together. I think now the update is that I still do have some mild swelling of the right knee, and I'm still working on dynamic stability of the ankle and the foot itself. So with walking and standing, it's pretty much the same kinds of positions for the ankle and the foot. There's not a lot of knee flexion. I'm not like squatting down all the way, and it's easier to maintain the foot arch. If ever like gone through like ankle rehab, right, you know what I'm talking about, where like you're just trying to like keep the arch right in place, right, while you're like doing some weird ass movement like walking or stepping forward. Even just the first few days that I tried the short foot exercise, right, it was so tough. I couldn't even do it in like a seated position, where my legs were just doing nothing except just trying to scrunch up into that position. And now I'm able to maintain like a single leg standing balance of it for like 10 seconds. There's still a lot of toe scrunching, so I think the next step is to just reduce that, and then we work on dynamic stabilization. So what does that mean? It's the same kind of concept principle as with the bench press. If your scapula can maintain position in one position, right? It doesn't like bleed out, it doesn't go into protraction or retraction that you don't want. Then now is how do I get the weight to move closer towards me without the scapula freaking out? It's the same thing. I want the foot arch to maintain this position while I am bending at the knee, getting the uh, knee over the toes, going into ankle dorsiflexion without the foot arch collapsing. So that's one thing. Then two, now I have to start loading that position so that I have like 200 kilos on my system. How do I get that foot arch not like collapse? And then I have to like figure it out along the way, make sure that it's like sustainable. So that's the end goal, which is how can I get the foot arch to maintain itself as I'm doing the sumo deadlift. And that's pretty much it. So we're aiming for sustainable work capacity in this. I'm hoping to get like just sets of 4-5 repetitions in. I'm thinking maybe just 3 sets would be good enough as a starting point. And what I'm looking to aim for is no loss of the foot arch by looking at the symptoms of the knee. So there shouldn't be any knee pain after I do the sumo deadlift. So that will be like on a set to set basis right now. Okay, maybe just let me clarify what I'm trying to say. So when you're experiencing pain, right, or injury or flare up, one of the things that you want to start to look out for is increasing your work capacity and tolerance. So tolerance is like, okay, if I do one repetition at 100 kilos, will I start to feel pain? No. Okay, let me just open up that tolerance to 2 reps. Oh, okay, no pain. Let me just keep going until like, okay, maybe I hit 5 repetitions, and that's 1 set. And I finish that set, and it feels fantastic. There's no pain. Then I move on to increasing that to the second set, and so on and so forth. So you start to build that that tolerance up by slowly testing over time. So 2 sets, 3 sets, 3 sets make up 1 session. So after like a Monday session of squats, do I have any pain after a Monday? No pain. Great. Let me just move on to the next week. And next Monday I do 3 sets again. And any pain? No. Okay. Then let me just finish whole block like this. And then the next block I review and okay, I think we can start to tolerate like 2 times frequency, and then we start to go through the same process again. So that's usually what's going through my mind as I'm working with someone who's injured, or perhaps having some intolerance issues. So with whatever concept that you're looking at, whether or not it's like technique, quality, uh, chronic pain, or injury, we are looking at this as the hallmark. Can you increase the athlete's capacity to just sustain work throughout the sets, the sessions, the weeks, the blocks? So once you can do that, you can start to shrink up the everything together and start to like really move closer towards like expressing the 1 max in the powerlift. So that is what we're aiming for sustainable work capacity. Hopefully I can finish like 1 week, 2 weeks without knee pain, and I can progressively increase the load in the sumo deadlift. Right now I'm still in the midst of just experiencing pain in the second set. Yeah. So we are a little bit far off. I would project that maybe I need 2 or 3 blocks. I'm hoping just 2 blocks to get my my knee in order. And there's also a little bit of, I would assume, remodeling of the motor skills, the positioning, and like my knee structure itself. So with like how long I've been walking around and accumulating all those knee pains and like small cycles of inflammation over the years, I am pretty sure there's some like permanent tissue changes in the knee, quote unquote, what you know as osteoarthritis. Okay, maybe it's not quote unquote. That's basically the inflammatory process of osteoarthritis. So I'm pretty sure there's some permanent changes there. So there's some permanent sensitivity in the knee as well. So that will explain why there's still mild swelling, even though I'm actually able to achieve the foot arch. Of course, I've not been able to achieve that in the dynamic sumo position, and that's something to work on. Very exciting, but very happy. And the next thing that I just want to add on is pretty much been working a lot more on hamstrings. And I think this is just in general, like for me to maintain um, stimulus over the muscles responsible for the deadlift. Uh, we already have squats, so the hamstrings is next. And if I look into like more specific rehab work for my foot, then I'm looking at more soleus work, more dynamic calf work, dynamic standing balance. So previously I was just working on static standing balance with the short foot position. So perhaps just going into a pistol squat with the arch, and I might be looking at getting specific uh orthosis. So basically like foot the insoles for the shoes, just to make it easier for me throughout the day and maybe in the gym itself. Exciting directions, a lot of unexplored things and minor issues that in powerlifting a lot of people just don't really have to care about. But I think for me, I care about it because one, it affects my training. Two, I do find a lot of intellectual curiosity when I am able to engage with this kind of hypothesis. I think three is um, at the core of what I do and why do what I do is I want to have my experiences and my knowledge serve those around me. And if I'm able to help myself throughout this period, then I'm able to get all the information I have and help someone else. Because every day, right, when I'm reading up about a condition or injury, right, they can tell you signs and symptoms. Signs you can observe. Symptoms are things that the person feels. And for example, you can say, oh, the joint is red because you can see clearly that the joint is red with your eyes. But you cannot like feel the person's pain. You cannot feel the person's um, symptoms of like perhaps catching at a particular angle, joint angle, or like this weird sensation of instability. Yes, you can test for those with specific tests, but then me being able to understand my own symptoms and my own conditions, then I can be quicker to empathize, quicker to diagnose, quicker to treat and catch for my athletes and those around me, um, their experiences. I think in this sense, this has really helped me, and it's really been a very formative experience for me when I got injured very, very long time ago, and that's what set me off on the path of being the coach and physio that I am right now. It's a very long story. This video is super long, so I'll leave that for next time. In any case, summary wise, that's all I have for my training fireside chat for August. Maybe I come back in October and then we have something new to talk about. And yeah, that's all from me. If you're interested in talking to me or getting coaching from one of the ENSŌ powerlifting coaches, can head on over to our website, have a look at everything we have there. If the work that we do resonates with you, you can let us know by dropping down a comment below or just reaching out, connecting with us. Let's say if you want to discuss your training or an injury, we have open doors for you. That's it for today, and see you for the next one.